about 7 o'clock, so we'll get officially underway here. My name is Mike Masseur. I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items before we get started, and then I'll hand it off to Brian Schuster, who will officially kick off the program for this evening. Thanks to those of you who have joined us tonight. Just a heads up that we are recording this session, and we'll have it for our files and make it available post-event. All of our attendees tonight, aside from obviously our project team, microphones and videos are turned off. There is a Q&A function that you'll see if you hover over your toolbar. Hopefully most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the basic functionality of Zoom, but if you move your cursor around the screen, you should see a toolbar that pops up, and one of those tools is a Q&A window where you are allowed to submit questions. To submit a question, just simply click on that, type in the question, and submit it. We'll have time at the end of tonight's presentation. There's as Brian will convey, there's quite a bit of material in here that we'll go through tonight, but at the end of the presentation, we will have some time to address some of the questions, perhaps all of the questions that have been submitted by our attendees. However, if we don't have the opportunity to get to all of the questions tonight, we will make an effort to connect with you offline after tonight's event to address any questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. And obviously, we would ask that everyone keep their questions and any sort of follow-up comments appropriate for tonight's venue. If you encounter some sort of technical issue with Zoom, for example, if the Q&A tool is not working for you, certainly we'd be happy to take your questions offline via email and address them with you one-on-one after the fact. So please don't let any interruption in technology prevent you from asking your questions of our team. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Brian to take us through or to launch into tonight's program officially.
All right, thank you, Michael, and welcome everybody to our Aquidneck Island open house for Energy Matters, all things National Grid and energy across Aquidneck Island. We attempted to try to do this in person in the spring, and of course, when the pandemic hit, we were forced to postpone the event. And really, this is the first time for me in my almost 20 years at National Grid that I'm conducting a virtual open house in this format. So bear with us if we have a little bit of technical difficulties here and there. I don't foresee any of those concerns, but you never know. And we do have somewhat of a controlled environment so that we protect the integrity of the overall presentation. So as Michael alluded to, we will be taking Q&A, or I'll have a full session on Q&A following the prepared materials. And just to set the stage on that, we have about roughly 45 minutes of materials, and I'll cover the agenda here in a minute. But we do want to make sure we get to your questions. And concerning questions, we are going to cover a few hot topics, ones that you want to hear about, ones that you've already submitted advanced questions for. And I'll tell you, we're going to try our best to answer those questions in the content of our prepared materials. So every time anybody sent something in, either to myself or through the registration link or through our form on our webpage, we've taken those questions and put them with the right subject matter experts on the various materials we're covering to try to make sure we cover that topic. But again, we will leave plenty of time after the prepared materials to get to your questions. You can ask questions as well that we may not be covering as far as prepared materials. We're going to do our best to answer those. I have a host of panelists that are joining me tonight. My colleagues, and through most of us, I think we should be able to answer most of your questions. But if we can't, just like Michael said, we will follow up with you post-event. Other kind of housekeeping items, just to make sure. I think that's about it on the Q&A overall. So, I do want to note that, your questions are anonymous, so we're not going to state your names or anything. So, but we are recording the session. We will be looking to post the material, the prepared content. We'll post that on our webpage. And we're looking for a mechanism to also post the overall recorded event itself. And at the end of the day, we're here to really engage and seek feedback overall. And we'll talk a lot more about sort of the future of energy as one of our core topics. We need your feedback, and I'll talk at the end of the prepared materials about, how you can provide your feedback, as that will help formulate decisions as we move forward. So, Michael, if you can move to the next slide, we'll get into the agenda of the prepared materials, please. So as you can see, we have 4 main topics that we will be covering tonight, and before we get into the open Q&A. The first topic is really around some of the more topical things for the greater, I'll call it the entire state, but we'll try to concentrate specifically on Aquidneck Island and some of the demand-side management and energy efficiency programs that we conducted, and then really around billing assistance, especially in light of the conditions of the pandemic and the concerns that some of you may have with regards to covering your bill and the like. So we'll kind of cover those, what I'll call lighter topics for tonight, but they're very important matters, very first and foremost. And then we'll get into our current planned winter operations for our temporary LNG over at O'Mill Lane in Portsmouth. And I know this is a very important topic for folks, so we want to make sure we cover really all the elements of it and make sure we establish the right understanding and the right basis of why we're out there and what it is that we're doing out there. And more importantly, all the safety protocols and measures that we have in place and all the work we've done with the local municipalities regarding our operation at O'Mill Lane. And then to tie into that, we'll move into our emergency planning, what we do, a light touch on how National Grid conducts emergency planning, the processes, the procedures, the training we do, the drills we do, and really all things emergency planning at National Grid. But really the capstone of the evening will be line item 4, as you see here. It's our long-term capacity study that we just completed. And what this really is outlining the options for us to move forward in regards to really the long-term enduring energy solution for Aquidneck Island, specifically for heating. We spent a lot of time and effort. There's been a lot of subject matter expertise put into this effort just in recent months. We just completed this study, and we're very excited to actually share the outcome of that study tonight. And this is really where we need your help, as we're going to be soliciting your feedback on the various options that will be presented. So we'll talk more about that as we get to it. And then, of course, as already discussed and mentioned, we have a Q&A session follow-up to make sure we've tied all the knots, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's, and so forth. And again, if we couldn't or can't answer your questions, we will do our best to make sure we get back to you as soon as possible with responses, either individually or in another forum. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter. Michael, if you want to advance the slide. And again, feel free to ask your questions as we go through the materials, but bear in mind, some of the topics may be covered later in the presentation, and that's fine. I'm going to be controlling the overall Q&A session, so hopefully I am able to collect and make sure I manage those questions accordingly based on the answers that we may have covered in the material.